Yay, we finished learning the basics of HTML and now it's time to get into CSS, also known as Cascading Style Sheets. CSS is used to take your HTML, your structure, and then style it in which way you want. And the possibilities are pretty much endless and only limited by your imagination. A really cool use case for CSS is CSSZenGarden.com. What this is that this is sort of just a demonstration of like the power of CSS and how versatile it is. This website shows the same site but styled differently, and people can upload their own styles and things like that. But this site, through all the different styles that we'll see in a second, all the HTML remains the same. The headings, the paragraphs, the page organizing elements, the inline elements. But by using different CSS, it can be styled totally different. So this is the same exact information, just laid out and styled in a different way. Same with this. Same information, the road to enlightenment, participation, benefits. Then we can go to the next designs or maybe back home to look at some next designs. Oh, here we go. Select a design. Sakura. Let's see what that looks like. Whoa! That reminds me of the late 90s, early 2000s. So really, it's the same information, just styled in a different way. So it's very fun. I love the problem solving aspect and the critical thinking of it, but it can be scary and overwhelming. So in this video, I'm going to go over what CSS is, the proper syntax, some common problems. But in the next video, we are going to actually style a bigger project, because I think the best way to learn CSS is to just sort of do it and to get that repetition in and see like the most common things that you can change. And then like anything else, I have to look up stuff all the time. I might Google like, how do I change the font or something like that. So don't be afraid if you don't know something to look it up. All right, so we left off with our site looking like this. I did remove the CSS that I had in there, so like apple pie is back to normal. It's no longer colored and stuff like that. And then this is sort of where we are trying to get to. We won't do the whole CSS for this, just a little bits and pieces so you can get the idea of what CSS is and how to type it. So in our HTML, we have our project folder. Your CSS will have to be in a styles folder. So make a new folder by doing the new folder and name it styles. And then inside that folder, make a new file with styles.css. Hopefully you remember how to do that. If not, go back to one of the past videos where I showed you how to do that. Little pop quiz. Do that. So this CSS file is where all of our CSS will live. None of it is showing up right now, and there is a reason for that I'll go over in a minute. But having your CSS in a separate document is the best practice. This is called external CSS. There is a version of internal CSS where you put it in the head of your HTML, and then there's a version of inline CSS where you put it in line with your HTML elements. Like in the actual like nav, I could put a style in right here. The reason why we don't do that is because it'll like really seriously clutter up the HTML and make it even harder to skim. When you're doing your CSS for a site, you will probably have hundreds of lines, and having all of that in the HTML while you're also trying to reference the HTML, you'll be scrolling up and down. It'll get way too confusing. So best practice is to do your CSS externally. Now, I'm going to delete all that. It's not working anyway. And the proper way to write CSS is to select something and then style it in a name value pair. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to collapse my Explorer so I have a little bit more room to work with. And I like to put my CSS on the side of my index or my HTML so I can see what elements I'm trying to style, and I can see what classes I need to call to, what IDs I need to call to. And you can call to different things. The first thing being the HTML element itself. So I can call to my header element. Whoa. And I will just call to header. Open up some curly braces. And then inside the curly braces is going to be what I'm changing about the header. So the header is my selector. It's what I'm selecting. It's what I'm targeting. And then inside is what I'm going to change about it. Now CSS is a little bit different. We are no longer including the triangle brackets when we are targeting an HTML element. That's only in the HTML file. In this file, if you want to target an element, it's just the element's name. Simple as that. So my header, I will give a background color, and then it's sort of like a bluey color. And maybe it's kind of light, like a cornflower blue. And nothing is happening. This header did not change color. It did not change the background color. The reason being is because this CSS file has no idea that this HTML document exists, and vice versa. So what we have to do is link them together. In the head of your HTML document, you will link to this CSS file. So type link without any triangle brackets, and then press enter to select that first one. So link, and it has an attribute of relation equals style sheet. So we're going to our style sheet, and then it has an href, just like a link, right? So we have to specify the file pathway to this CSS file. So it is going through a styles folder, and file name is styles.css. And there we go. Now it is working. So this will probably be the first mistake that you make when starting your CSS, is just forgetting to link the files together. You can be doing everything right here, and you're like, what is going on? Did I misspell something? What's happening? It could all be right, but it just doesn't, they just don't see each other. Okay, now the proper syntax for, let me scooch this over a little bit. It's hard to get on one line, but the proper syntax for writing CSS is you're going to have your name value pair. So what's being changed about the header? It's the background color. What's it being changed to? And then here's the color value information. And we'll go over all of these a bit more in depth. And then you will end your declaration with a semicolon. So this means now I can go on to my next one. So what else do I want to change about my header? Let's center all the text, I guess. So I can do a text align center, and that'll center all the text. I can add some padding, margin. We'll go all over all of that within the coming videos. So you can have multiple style declarations within one style block. That is why the curly braces, I always have the closing one, the closing curly brace on a line all by itself. So it's really easy to see where one style block begins and one ends. And the next one begins, right? And it's also indented, so I can clearly see what declarations are in which block. If you forget the semicolon, just like if you forget the closing slash in your HTML, it's not going to register this as you have finished, and it's just gonna not work. So this will be your second most common mistake, probably, just forgetting these semicolons. Luckily, VS Code is pretty helpful. So if I delete one, I will know that something is kind of wrong because this just changed color. It's now just white. I have a little red error message there and here. And then my little mini map has a red highlight. So there's an error happening somewhere in this area. So it helps you to really pinpoint where things are going wrong. And all it takes is making a few mistakes a couple times, and then you'll start to hopefully learn from them and be able to identify them really, really easily. So if something breaks, it doesn't work, that's okay. That's one of the best ways to learn, is to make mistakes and then to learn from them. Okay, so this is one way of calling to something, calling to the element itself. You can also call to classes and IDs. So I do have a recipe ID for this section right here. So I want to call to that and give it a background color of that pale yellow color, maybe a border as well, things like that. So that has an ID of recipe. When calling to an ID, it's the hashtag symbol and then the name that you gave it. So recipe. And just so we can be sure, I'll scroll down to that section. It's about line 53 in my HTML. That section has an ID of recipe. And then I will give it a background color. And I'll try antique white and see how close that is. Pretty close. Now, when calling to an ID or classes, the name that you're calling to has to match the name that you gave it exactly in the HTML. If one of them is capitalized and the other one is not, it's not going to recognize it. It has to match exactly. So that's why we should be using all lowercase, so we don't run into problems like that. Recipe. Another common one is that it will be spelled differently. So maybe in your HTML you have it as recipes, but in your CSS you left out that S and it can't find each other. They can't find it because it doesn't exist. Only recipes with an S exists. So we'll take that away. And there we go. So that's calling to an ID, the hashtag, and then the ID name. Then we have a class. To call to a class, let's see, do I have a class? Well, I do. It's not in our original design, but I'll call to this holiday class again. To call to a class, it's period, and then your class name. Then I'll just give it a background color so we can make sure that we targeted it correctly. There we go. Okay. Another thing, or another way to target something, is to target the child of a parent. For example, in my design, Stephanie's kitchen is an H2, as well as a traditional fall favorite, ingredients, and instructions. So a traditional fall favorite, ingredients, instructions, they're all styled the same. I could target the H2 and it would target all of them, but it would also target this one, which is not styled the same. So let's take a look at that. Let me just demonstrate that. So I'll target all H2s. And what am I changing about this one? The font family is going to go from Times to Arial. Okay, so that changed that to Arial, 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 and then that one's also Arial. And then maybe we're changing the font size. We'll go over font size and rems and stuff later. Okay, so now these are the correct size, but this one is too small. So how do I target this H2 specifically? Well, I could give it a class or an ID and then call to that class, or I can call to the H2 that is directly within my header. So when you have a style selector like this with a space in between two things, it's saying look inside the header and then select the H2. And then this one, I will make my font size, I don't know, much bigger, twice as big, maybe too big. But there we go. So it's targeting this H2 that is in the header. And since these are not in the header, it will not target them. And this brings me to another point of CSS, is that we targeted the H2 here, and we targeted it again. So this H2 style is overriding the one previous to it. That's where the name Cascading Style Sheets comes to play. Let me change the color of it to white. So now the text color is white. Let me change the color again to red. And now it's gone to red, and it's kind of hideous. But that is the point of a cascading style, is that the last one that is red, the last one that is written, is the style that will win and show up. So if you ever need to like override something, and then we also have to kind of be careful where we write certain pieces of CSS. You might override something that you don't mean to because it's lower down in your CSS and it should be higher up. So that's one problem that you can run into, and we'll have to be mindful of that. But that is the basics of CSS, how to write it, what it kind of means, some common problems that you'll run into. Now, the task at hand is to just start learning all of the things that you can change and how you can change them. And like I said, the best way to do that is to just do it and probably follow along and see somebody else do it. So that is why in the next video, we're going to start with a new project, a bigger web page, and we'll look at styling lots of different things, lots of different ways.